Trafficking. Human trafficking is the forced trade of people mainly for sex or labor. First, I want to tell you about stories of girls who have been trafficked, then statistics about it, and what I'm doing to help stop human trafficking. The first story I want to tell you about is Stella. Stella was a handicapped orphan from Moldova, a little country between Ukraine and Romania. At 16, the orphans are released from the orphanage with $30 and a bus ticket back to their hometown. At 16, Stella was kidnapped and sold as a sex slave for 2 years until she died of AIDS. Philip Cameron, an American man, would come to visit her along with the other orphans in the orphanage. And one day he came to the orphanage and said, "Unde Stella?" which meant, "Where's Stella?" And the man replied, "Marit." She was dead. In Philip Cameron's book, Soldiers Saved, he tells stories about orphan girls and the orphanages in Moldova. On December 6, Philip Cameron went into an orphanage and the orphanage director said, "Have you ever seen a baby freeze to death?" Before Philip Cameron could reply, the man said, "We've had 15 babies freeze to death this year." He put in heaters and fixed broken windows, and not one baby has frozen to death since. But one thing he cannot stop is the Moldovan tradition of letting the girls go out onto the streets at 16. He estimates that 60% of the girls will be trafficked. Because of Stella, Stella's Voice was created, an organization that saves boys and girls from being trafficked like Stella was. They are given love for their first time, and they're also given their first hug. Imagine having your first hug at 16 years old. You may be wondering what this has to do with you, but it actually has a lot to do with you. Slavery still goes on today. A famous quote by Abraham Lincoln is, "If slavery isn't wrong, then nothing is." Some people do not think slavery goes on in the world today. They think, well, if it does, it doesn't happen in the United States. They couldn't be more wrong. The U.S. Department of State estimates that more than 14,000 people in the United States are trafficked annually. I want you to think about children you know. Do you know any 12-year-olds? The A21 campaign estimates that the average age for a sex slave is 12 years old. The traffickers altogether profit $32 billion a year. It really is in America, and it can affect you. Jennifer Fisher's book, Human Trafficking, Law Enforcement Guide, estimates that 56% of traffickers are U.S. citizens. Philip Cameron estimates that only 1% of the girls are ever rescued. If you still don't think it's in your backyard, think again. Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott estimates that the Super Bowl is the largest human trafficking incident in the United States. The pimps and traffickers bring their girls in to service the football players and other people that come to watch the football players. The last story I want to tell you about is about a girl who barely made it out alive. I want to tell you about how she got involved in human trafficking, what happened to her at 14, how she got out, and some disturbing facts she gave. Melissa Woodward was sold by a family member before she was even a teenager, and she was forced to serve several men a night. At 14, her pimp lived out his fantasy to see a child burned to death. He doused her in gas and lit her on fire. Several days later, she woke up in a dumpster, and at 14, had to learn how to live on the streets. One day, she did end up making it out of trafficking and the streets, but barely. Eventually, she had 3 children, and one of the kids came home and said, "Mom, I found Jesus." The mom just sat, nodded, and listened. Yeah. Standing in the street, that night she stood in the streets in the rain, crying, and she was praying to God, and she felt Him talk to her. And as the rain went off of her, she felt God washing her shame away and became a brand new person. She found healing and is now helping girls all over the United States. Melissa gave some disturbing facts. Human trafficking is the second largest crime in America next to drug trafficking. Before you think of running away next time, I want you to think of this fact. 95% of American runaways are approached by a trafficker or a pimp within 48 hours. What are the facts? Nita Belize said in her book, In Our Own Backyard, there are 27 million slaves. That is more than ever in history. That is bigger than the population of Texas. What I am telling you is that you can fill the state of Texas with the victims from human trafficking and still have victims left over that have no room in Texas. Remember the organization Stella's Voice I mentioned earlier? This is Natalie. I was able to spend 2 months with her and other orphans from Moldova. They are the most amazing people I have ever met, and they have the saddest stories, but they still smile and praise God every day. I fundraised for Stella's Voice since I was 16, and it has given me a passion for life. I have fundraised $14,000 in 2 years by selling key necklaces, butterfly necklaces, and Stella's Voice bracelets. Human trafficking only happens because we let it. Stand up and tell your friends and family what I told you today. You can make a difference.